I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. With all due respect to Donald Trump, your chances of winning Miss Congeniality in the Miss Mexico pageant, not very good. On the show tonight, Bernie and Bob, but first, boom, goes to the Supreme Court. John, who's your winner and your loser in the SCOTUS ruling in favor of Obamacare?
My winner is Barack Hussein Obama, who has had now 2 successive Supreme Court challenges to his signature law, both of which could have destroyed it, both of which he survived. He's now got a clear sailing to the end of his term. It will still be contested. People will still complain about it. But every day that passes, it's more likely to remain deeper and deeper ingrained in the fabric of American life and less likely to go anywhere.
Yeah, I agree he's the big winner, and so are the people who believe in the Affordable Care Act. Republicans are underestimating the extent, the challenge their nominee is going to have in describing a world in which something is better than the Affordable Care Act. The Republicans are right. The Affordable Care Act is still unpopular, but the old system was unpopular, and anything the Republican proposes, Democrats are going to pick apart. So this thing is going to be more and more ingrained. It's going to be harder and harder, not just to repeal it, but for a Republican to run against it. You're loser.
You know there's no such thing as a perfect law, and nothing's ever done. It will be argued about forever. We're still arguing about Medicare and Social Security.
Who's your biggest loser?
My biggest loser are the people who saw Barack Obama making confident assertions about the law a couple weeks ago and predicted that he somehow knew that it was going to go down today, that they had been reading the tea leaves, and the only reason he was coming out so aggressively was because they knew it was headed for defeat. In fact, I think what it really reflected was confidence, and well-founded confidence, it turns out, today.
The biggest loser to me are the Republican presidential candidates who can't paint a picture of a different health care plan. It's a complicated thing to do in the context of a campaign, both within the nomination fight and the general election. There are some people, like Jeb Bush, who I think can explain a world with a better health care plan. But pity the Republicans who can't, because Republicans want a nominee who has a better plan than the Affordable Care Act. For Republicans and the general electorate, it's hard to do.
I'll tell you what voters want less than they want Obamacare. They want more chaos. The only thing they want less, more chaos, more confusion, more change. That's why this thing is going to survive forever.
And a new plan that would be unpopular because it would take away parts of the plan that are popular.
Are super popular, right. Okay. In a pair of new Bloomberg Politics polls conducted simultaneously in Iowa and New Hampshire, we dug into the Democratic race and came up with strikingly similar findings in each state about the battle between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. In both places, Sanders is gaining ground on Clinton, but she still leads him by a 2-to-1 margin. On some issues, Clinton does better, like foreign policy and who can win a general election. But on others, like authenticity and fighting Wall Street, Sanders does better. So, Mark, on the basis of these twin polls conducted with our friends out in Iowa and in New Hampshire, what do you see as Sanders' potential and as Clinton's vulnerabilities?
I think Sanders can still grow. It's still a challenge to beat her. She's still immensely popular. She's still doing incredibly well with women. But the fact that he's doing well with independents, the fact that people like him on some pretty signature issues like fighting Wall Street, and I still believe that attacking him is going to be difficult. If the Clinton side comes after him, this is an expectations game. It will be. Right now, if the caucuses, the primary were now, and he got half the vote of hers, 50 to 25, she'd be in a fight.
Well, and we're going to talk about this later on the show with Senator Sanders. But today, when Claire McCaskill attacked him this morning on Morning Joe, the issues she attacked him on as being a socialist were all issues where he is much closer to the mainstream of the Democratic Party than Claire McCaskill is. And so, he can fight with the, well, call me a socialist if you want, but this is where the party is on issues like Medicare for all, minimum wage.
I'll give you an example on that. You think in her heart Hillary Clinton would take single payer if she could have it?
Oh, my God.
She said as much, reportedly, on a few occasions. So when Claire McCaskill says Bernie Sanders is a socialist because he wants single payer, that's where Hillary Clinton's heart is. The worst thing for a politician to do is to not say what they actually believe. And Hillary Clinton's particularly bad at that.
Look, I will say that this poll, the strength that Hillary Clinton has with women, it's going to be very hard for Bernie Sanders to dent that. The strength she has with African Americans, very hard for Bernie Sanders, being basically an old white guy. It's going to be hard for him to dent that. There's a ceiling on his support. It's not where it is now. He's still got room to grow, but she's got such strength with some of those people with some of those groups. It's going to be hard for him ever to get over the hump.
People should go to BloombergPolitics.com and take a look at the polls.
The whole thing.
Because what's fascinating about it is we polled Iowa and New Hampshire at the same time, which isn't usually done. And what's interesting is the numbers on almost every question are identical.
Yes.
The horse race numbers, the attribute numbers.
And these are the places where people are paying most attention.
Interesting stuff. Take a look. All right, coming up, We talked to Bernie Sanders, who responds to us about Claire McCaskill's game-changing breakfast TV attack on him. And next up, Bob Woodward's hottest hot takes on the Obamacare ruling from the Supreme Court after this word from our sponsors.
We're joined now by Bloomberg's man at the Supreme Court, Greg Stohr. Greg, some are casting this as a bad day for John Roberts, the Chief Justice, as he faces deafening howls from his old friends on the right. But you say this is a good day for the Chief Justice. Why?
Well, look, this was always going to be a tough case for John Roberts. Either he's going to make conservatives mad at him, or he runs the risk that the court undercuts Obamacare in a decision that is heavily criticized for being partisan. And John Roberts cares deeply about the institutional legitimacy of this court, and so he went with a decision that backed Obamacare. The reason I think it's a good day for him is, first of all, unlike 3 years ago, he's not alone. He's got Anthony Kennedy with him in the majority. And secondly, this is a ruling that he chose to write himself. He could have very easily handed it off to Justice Ginsburg, Justice Kennedy, but he chose to write it, and I suspect it's a ruling he's very proud of, and I suspect he's feeling good about himself today. All
right, Greg Stohr, thank you very much. Our second guest tonight is the legendary Bob Woodward of the Washington Post. He's the author of one of the great books about the Supreme Court, The Brethren. Bob, thanks for joining us from our Washington bureau. Bob, at the very end, the very last line of that book, that famous book, The Brethren, was the center was in control. I think for a lot of people on the left, when John Roberts became Chief Justice, they thought the center was not going to be in control. Tell us how you think John Roberts became a man of the center and in some ways a hero of the left.
Well, because he's smart about the politics of the court. I know people like to say, oh, there are no politics in the Supreme Court, but there always is. And what happened 36 years ago is Warren Burger, who was Chief Justice, lost control because he let the center justices really dictate the rulings. And so what Roberts has done is he's outflanked both the left and the right, and in a way is a swing vote. If you read this opinion, it's a very subtle one. Can I tell a story of a couple years ago running into Justice Scalia, of course, who dissented in this case, and he said to me in his pleasant way, you know, how come you always write about presidents? And I said, because presidents have the most power. And he said, wrong, wrong, wrong. And then gave me a little quiz. What is the first article of the Constitution? And I said, the legislature. And he said, see? Well, if you look at his opinions, argues for the preeminence of the legislature. What Roberts has done in this opinion is argued for the preeminence of the legislature, saying his interpretation and the majority interpretation of Obamacare is its context, its structure, what its intent was, and they clearly meant, he says, we're not going to destroy Obamacare. So it's judo. You use the leverage of your opponent against himself.
Bob, I want to ask you to put this in a little bit of historical context. We've had plenty of cases in the last century of presidents picking justices who end up not being the kind of justices they'd like. Roosevelt and Frankfurter, Bush the elder, and Justice Souter. Is it too soon to say that George Bush might have made a mistake from his own point of view in elevating John Roberts to Chief Justice and putting him on the court?
No, I don't think so, because Roberts is playing a subtle game here about being in control and not letting the center, now there aren't too many center justices, maybe Kennedy, take control, and they do to a certain extent here. But Roberts is a conservative, and if you had former President George W. Bush on truth serum and said, do you think this decision makes sense, I think he would say yes. No one wanted to blow up the health care system, and in a sense, that's what Roberts is saying here.
He's obviously taking a lot of grief, Chief Justice Roberts, today from his old friends on the right, Bob. And I guess my question to you, Mark alluded to past instances. There are many more where justices have ended up being somewhat different than people expected them to be, and the presidents that appointed them expected them to be, and sometimes to the president's regret. Do these justices, do they change? Does the court change them, or does it just that the times that change around them?
Well, both, obviously. But, I mean, look what's happened here. I mean, yeah, Roberts may be getting some grief from the right wing on this, but his argument is, wait a minute, we're letting the people, the legislature, decide. And he dug into the law in a rather sophisticated way and said, look, this is what they meant. And he quotes an old 1939 decision saying that, you know, it's risky to get into this area of interpreting the law because it then becomes the law, but you have to do it. That and cites Mayberry versus Madison and saying we decide what the law is. So he's not going to be seriously criticized by any conservative constitutionalists.
And Bob, you've seen your share of big Washington news days. Put today's decision in context for the Obama administration, for Supreme Court decisions, for just sort of big news. How big a story will this turn out to be for history?
Well, of course, it'd be a much bigger story if they overturned the law, and so it lets things go along as they are. But what if you look at enough of Supreme Court activity inside and the state of mind of the justices and so forth, they're not going to do anything radical unless it's unanimous. That's when they do something really different, and there was no way anybody could find unanimity in this, and so in terms of overturning it, and so Roberts moved to the center. I also think temperamentally that's where he fits in the spectrum.
Bob, given that analysis and given everything you know about the court, I know you don't like to do prediction, but do you have any doubt in your mind that either tomorrow or Monday the court is going to come down in favor of gay marriage nationally?
Well, you can't tell, and you know, unfortunately, there aren't leaks out of the Supreme Court. It would be nice if they are. Let's leave our phone numbers and emails here. Maybe somebody will give us a clue.
I'm sure you already have, Bob.
But no, I certainly don't. And you know, everyone thinks they know. People thought they knew in this case that it was going to be 5-4, and it sure isn't.
All right, Bob Woodward, thank you so much for being with us today. When we come back,
thank you, nice.
The man that everyone's talking about, no, not Channing Tatum, Bernie Sanders, after the break.
I declare.
I am announcing.
I'm a candidate.
I'm a candidate.
I'm a candidate.
I am running. I am running.
Running for president.
For president.
For president
of the greatest country in the world.
The United States of America.
Just make a brief comment and be happy to take a few questions. We don't have an endless amount of time. I've got to get back.
All right, we don't have an endless amount of time either, but we hope our guest, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, a Democratic presidential candidate, will take a few questions from us. Senator, thank you for joining us on Capitol Hill.
My pleasure.
I want to start by asking you briefly about the news of the day, the Supreme Court decision 6-3 in favor of upholding the Affordable Care Act. What would you say in response to that decision to Chief Justice Roberts, and what would you say to your Republican colleagues who are vowing to repeal the law?
Well, look, I think it was the right decision. I think it was consistent with the way we voted and what we intended to vote for in the Affordable Care Act. But I would also say that we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. 35 million people still have no health insurance. The idea of throwing 6.4 million people off of health insurance would be totally absurd and disruptive of the Affordable Care Act, so I'm happy with the decision.
Senator Sanders, you did a press conference today in which you unveiled a new plan dealing with the estate tax. There's a variety of things that are involved there, including ending tax breaks for dynasty trusts and billionaire surtax. I'm curious as to whether the objective here is primarily deficit reduction or whether it's primarily about income inequality. What's the driving ambition here of this plan?
We today have massive and grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality. I mean, the top 0.1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. We have got to address that issue. And one of the fairest, the most straightforward ways of doing it is through a progressive estate tax. It can raise significant sums of money. I can't tell you exactly how much, but it will be significant sums. And some of that money has got to go to be invested in rebuilding our infrastructure, expanding and supporting our child care system, making college affordable for all of our kids. The rest of that could go to deficit reduction.
This is not the first time you've proposed an estate tax bill. You did that in 2010, in 2014. Neither time did that go anywhere. What is it? What's different this time, either in terms of the political environment you're introducing it in, or in terms of your strategy of how to actually get it passed?
No, I don't think it's going to get passed with when Republicans control the House and the Senate. I've never suggested that. But I think it is becoming more and more apparent to the American people that something is fundamentally wrong in this country when so few have so much and so many have so little.
So, Senator, as you know, we did a pair of polls, one in Iowa, one in New Hampshire, to try to get a sense of how voters are thinking about you. You've got a quarter of the vote about in both Iowa and New Hampshire, up from our previous polls in those states. Independents are being pretty supportive of you. This morning on Morning Joe, I asked Senator McCaskill, your colleague, about you and your chances. I want you to listen to what she said.
I think the media is giving Bernie a pass right now. I very rarely read in any coverage of Bernie that he's a socialist. I think he would like to see Medicare for all in this country. He would like to see expansion of entitlement. He would like to see, he is not worried about a debt at all. He is somebody who I think is frankly against trade. He's against a whole lot of things that are unrealistic in this day and age.
So, Senator, I know you like to stay away from personality and talk about issues. So let me ask you, on the issues Senator McCaskill raised and suggested they were part of your socialist beliefs and made you unelectable, guilty as charged, or you want to clarify the record?
I find it surprising that she says that the media doesn't refer to me as a socialist. There's no article that I've seen that doesn't refer to me as a democratic socialist. I am. Do I believe in a Medicare for all single-payer system? Absolutely. Do I believe, in opposition to Senator McCaskill, that we need trade policies that are fair to the American worker and not just benefit CEOs of large corporations? I plead guilty. I think we need to change our trade policies.
We couldn't think of another instance in which one of your Democratic Senate colleagues has spoken out against you that way. Have you heard people speak out against you that way, and why do you think Senator McCaskill is now?
To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that a colleague has attacked me. You'll have to ask Senator McCaskill why. I think it's unfortunate. As you know, and I know I bore you guys sometimes to death, but I am trying to run an issue-oriented campaign and not one of personal attacks.
Just to be clear, Senator Sanders, you never bore us. You're always 100% delightful. I want to ask you a little bit more about this poll. And again, we're going to stick with issues. But just think about you've gained ground in both Iowa and New Hampshire in our poll and others on Hillary Clinton. We dug a little deeper, though, and looked at some of the underlying data. And there's some places where you're clearly behind her. One of them is with women, where she dominates you 59% to 19 in Iowa, 64 to 19 in New Hampshire. I'm going to ask you to make the case to female voters as to why they should support you. They, in particular, should support you over Hillary Clinton, especially given that she would be a historic figure for that gender.
Right. And I do understand that, and you're absolutely right. There are millions of women who are excited about the possibility of a woman for the first time becoming president of the United States. I fully understand that and appreciate that. I think, on the other hand, if you look at my economic agenda that says to women workers, you can't keep working for $10 or $12 an hour. We need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We are going to unveil a child care proposal for universal pre-K, which I think will make working families all over this country extremely excited, because what we have now is a disaster.
So, Senator, beyond your rising to a quarter of the vote in both Iowa and New Hampshire, you're doing well compared to Secretary Clinton on the issue of who's more authentic, on the issue of who would take on Wall Street and other wealthy interests. But I want to ask you about another one where you're not doing as well as her and ask you to make the case. You said before you feel passionately about your estate tax proposal, but you said Republicans control Congress, can't get it done. We asked people in both states who can get things done better in D.C. as president. In Iowa, 64-11, Hillary Clinton over you. In New Hampshire, 67% said Hillary Clinton, 15% you. So Republicans will probably control the House in January of 2017. They may well control the Senate, even if you got elected president. Make the case that you can get more done than Hillary Clinton in Washington, given the reality of Republicans controlling the House.
That is a very important question. And let me tell you what I say in every speech that I give. What I say is that given the power of the billionaire class, corporate America, Wall Street, and heavy-duty campaign contributors, nothing is going to happen to benefit working families unless millions of people around the country begin to stand up and say enough is enough. And what I have said is that if elected president, I will be part of a mass movement which will be strongly organized and very dynamic, that says to Congress, we know what's going on, we are following what's going on, and you'd better vote to raise the minimum wage, to make college affordable, to deal with climate change, to deal with income and wealth inequality. In other words, it is my view that no president, not Bernie Sanders, not Hillary Clinton, nobody is going to deal with the needs of the disappearing middle class unless we have a new political movement in this country that stands up and fights against the power of the billionaire class.
All right, Senator Sanders, I'm going to ask you another question about an issue area where you're trailing Senator Clinton or Secretary Clinton, and in this area you are being shellacked in our poll, which is foreign policy experience. In Iowa, 84-3. Hillary Clinton leading, and in New Hampshire, 84-8. You are clearly to her left in terms of national security and in terms of foreign policy, I would say. Just again, explain why you think you're being shellacked to that extent, guys, and what your case is that you would be a better foreign policy president than Hillary Clinton.
Good, fair question. The answer is, it goes without saying that when you are the Secretary of State for the United States of America for 4 years, by definition, you have an enormous amount of experience in foreign policy. No one can debate that. I was not Secretary of State. In fact, I'm not on the Foreign Relations Committee, and I'm not on the Armed Forces Committee. But this is what I will tell you. Hillary Clinton back in 2003 and I both had the same information with regard to the wisdom of going into Iraq. Not only did I vote against the war in Iraq, but I helped lead the opposition to that war. I looked very hard at the most important foreign policy issue of the last several decades, and that is the war in Iraq. I was right on that issue. Hillary Clinton was wrong on that issue.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, Democratic Socialist, and proud of it, despite what some other people say. Senator, thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
We are always on BloombergPolitics.com, and tomorrow we'll have a live stream of President Obama's remarks in Charleston.
Remember, we're on twice a day here at 5 and at 8. Until tomorrow, thanks for watching. Sayonara.